It was really high, so just give me a moment. I'm going to try and put it down. That's better. Great. So, what are we going to talk about today? So, first of all, I'm going to talk a little bit through these things, and then we're going to have a panel. We've got some current PhDs and an academic who works with PhDs coming to do a Q&A at the end. So hopefully you'll have a good insight by the time we finish. What I'm going to cover mainly are what is a PhD, where to look for opportunities for PhDs, how to apply, so what does an application look like, what do you need to consider, and then we'll look at also funding and what can you do career-wise beyond that. So we've got a lot to get through. I'm going to get started. If you're here today, I'm assuming you've already asked some of these questions, but the main motivations for wanting to do a PhD for most people, okay, I've just highlighted a few of these. It may be very different for you, but generally this is the reasons. So first and foremost, if you're thinking about doing a PhD, you might be thinking, well, what is it? And you might have some idea. But ultimately, it's about making an original contribution to the field that you choose to do your PhD in. So throughout the time that you'll be doing that project, you'll be creating original research material to that field. Now, for most people, it's an entry route into a research career or working in academia. Although a lot of people do also take their PhD and go and work outside of academia, so working in industry. We see this in a lot of organisations where somebody working at the highest levels of research will be required to have a PhD. So it's not just in academia, it's just that's where generally most people tend to work. During the time that you do it as well, you will develop a wide range of transferable skills alongside it, so it's not like you're just strictly a researcher, and it's also not unusual for people with a PhD to go into something different. So you're not pigeonholing yourself. Just because you choose to do a PhD does not mean that you're stuck in research, but you'll be able to come to appreciate that as you move through, and we will talk a little bit more about that as well. But mainly, the idea is you become a specialist in your field. So whatever it is you go into, you're going to become a specialist in that particular project, that field that it's in. And so it's quite broad what a PhD is, and it will differ depending on what field you're in, what the project is, what type of PhD. So we'll do a little bit more of that afterwards. Now, if you are looking at the slides and thinking, oh, do I need to take a picture of them all? I will share them afterwards if you've registered your attendance on the QR code that I shared at the beginning of the session. If you've come later, I will reshare the QR code. So I'm happy to share the slides with you. So what does a PhD entail? You probably already have some ideas about this, but these are just some general things to think about. So, oh wait there, gone too fast. Okay, so throughout that time that you'll be doing the PhD, you're going to be ongoing researching, you're going to be developing yourself. It's usually 3, 4, but sometimes even if someone does it part-time, it can be up to 6 years onwards. So depending on the type, there's no one model. So a lot of the things I'm telling you are quite flexible, but generally at the fastest I've known somebody do a PhD is in 3 years, but that is intensely full-time. So generally the most tend to be around 4 years. You'll work with a supervisor, so you'll have somebody, an academic supervisor of some kind who will be overseeing your research, but for the most part you're working very independently. So unlike when you do a taught course, such as an undergraduate or a taught master's, the guidance that you get is quite minimal, and you'll have contact points throughout your time doing your PhD, but you will be mostly self-led, so it's very independent. And generally, you've got a long thesis at the end of it as well. Now, different types of PhDs to be aware of, so there's many different types out there. You may have seen that some are funded and some are not funded. So some people, crazy as it seems, actually fund their own PhD. They don't have any funding, and they might propose their own project to somebody. Maybe there's somebody senior in that field and they'll say, oh, I'd like to do a PhD on this project, I'll fund it myself. Most students are looking at something funded, and the funding usually is quite minimal. It's a stipend that sees you through, it pays for the basics. So it's also not unusual to see PhDs who have a part-time job of some kind, whether that's tutoring or something else. So when we're talking about funding, these are not massive sums of money. These are not a salary. It's basically just enough to keep you going. So you probably will have seen that if you're looking at PhDs out there already. You can sometimes have them integrated with a master's. So sometimes there's a master's and a PhD attached in one programme that you apply for. We see this more commonly when you apply to universities that offer a structured programme for a PhD. And you can also do them as a doctoral training programme, which is sometimes done in partnership with multiple universities. So that there's quite a lot of variation. And then finally, we also see professional PhDs, which are often with an employer. So sometimes somebody might be working for an organisation already, and then their employer will send them to do a research project and a PhD within the organisation. Now in these cases, they're often paid for by the employer, and they tend to be when you're a little bit more experienced in your career, so these are kind of coming to it a bit later. There's also such a thing as PhD by publication, and that's when someone's done a significant body of work, and retrospectively they're awarded a PhD based on the merit of their work. For the most part, most of you will be looking at opportunities that are advertised and applying to them, and so you'll most likely be looking for funded opportunities. And in these cases, they're usually advertised like a job description almost, where it tells you what the project is, what skills you need to have, what interests you'll likely have, and it will tell you basically almost like a job description checklist of what you need to have, and then you put in an application. We'll talk a little bit more about that as well. Now on these slides I do have some links that I will share afterwards where you can click through and read more information on each topic. I appreciate that we're moving through this quite quickly just because of time. Now, I've kind of given this away already, but just a question, how many words are in a typical PhD dissertation? Now, you'd be surprised how many people don't know this. I've already given it away, so I'm not even going to ask the room. But most people will say something like 50,000, 80,000, but usually it can be anything in between there, but quite commonly the most common thing I hear is about 100,000 words. That's a lot of work. Think about that compared to the dissertation that you'll write in your final year or in your end of your master's. It's a lot of work, and that's why you're working on it for 4 years, okay? And it's got a breakdown there about what that looks like, usually about 10,000 words a chapter. We'll look a little bit on the next slide about how that might look, as in how you break up your years and what you're doing each time, but it is a lot of work and you're doing that on your own. So think about it, if you're applying for opportunities like this or you're thinking about a research career, how comfortable are you working independently or with minimum supervision? You'll completely be responsible for managing your own time. Okay, it's going to be down to you. You'll see your supervisor only for touch points, but you are leading on this. So think about that. And have you managed to find ways to demonstrate your independent working already? Because that will certainly help you when you're applying and writing a statement about why you want to do this project. So there's 7 stages of a successful doctorate according to this findaphd.com, which is a great website if you're looking for opportunities, if you're wanting to see what's out there. And it's just a breakdown generally of what it looks like, the stages of completing your PhD. Now the first stage of course is just applying. Now in some cases you're applying to, as I said, an advertised position where it will say this is the project, this is the type of background you'll have, and the project will be very specific. You will be doing this, you will be researching this very specific thing, and you're writing to apply for that. If you're thinking of funding your own project, or if you're thinking of reaching out to somebody to ask if there's potential funding for a project that you've already thought of, then you will be writing your own research proposal. So there's 2 options there. But again, this is pre doing the PhD, but that's usually the first stage, is the application. And then, when you get started, you'll be carrying out a literature review or some sort of survey of the current information that's out there. So timings of this will be completely flexible. It will be depending on your relationship with your supervisor. But generally, when you get started, you'll be reviewing what's out there already on this topic, because you're there to add new information, to do new research. So you'll need to do an overview of what already exists. Then you'll be conducting your own research and gathering those results. So that might be doing surveys, it might be going out and interviewing people, it might be in the lab, depending on what you're going into. Then, so this is for those who are doing an integrated one. So you might be starting off with the original. If you're doing something that's got a master's attached to a PhD, that could be all in your first year, that could be all in your master's year. If you're going straight in, this will be part of it, but once you've done your literature review, you'll then be starting to build your original thesis, so your argument. You'll be looking at your research and then working on your paper, which then you will write into your dissertation, which will be your big report. And then you will defend that. So, you've probably heard of what Aviva, you've probably some idea, but that's where you will defend your argument and your work to a panel. So, all of this can happen at any point. Obviously, the end point is quite fixed, that's at the end. But how long you spend on each component will be agreed with your supervisor. But generally, that's the format that you'll see if you're going to apply for PhD opportunities, and that's what you'll be expected to do. If anyone has any questions throughout, please do put your hand up if you'd like me to stop or explain anything further. Okay?
I do have a question on the first step, actually. Can I interrupt you?
Yeah.
On the first step, on the preparation, you're saying that if, let's say I'm having a very specific area, then I would also, if I look for funding for myself, so do I need first to have the supervisor and then look for funding, or could I find ways of applying for funding with companies, whatever, and then look for the supervisor? How it works?
So again, there's a lot of flexibility in the way that this might work. So for the majority of people, they'll be applying for projects that are already advertised, and they'll say there's funding or there's not funding. If you're looking to fund something yourself, so first of all, some people will fund it out of their own pocket because they've got the money to, which is great for them. Majority of people don't. Now, sometimes academics who work in a certain field and research in a certain field can apply for funding, so then you can work with that academic to propose a project, and they might say, this sounds like a great project, write up a proposal and we'll put it forward for funding. So that would be down to you to identify somebody who is in that field, who's interested in your research, and is going to be basically your person, who's going to supervise you and encourage you. So you can absolutely take that approach. You need to be quite specific, and there are materials, I believe in the slides later, I've got some materials about writing a research proposal if you've got a very specific idea of what you want to research. Most people are quite flexible, or they like to see what's out there already, but if you know what you want to do is quite niche, then you will have to take a far more flexible approach, and there's resources to support with that. Okay? Great. So here's a question. So what percentage of PhDs go on to become a professor? 3 options. 0.5, 2%, or 15%. What do we reckon? 15?
Something weird, I'm guessing 8.
8? Okay.
2%. Gotta be something.
2%? Okay, do we think higher or lower than 15%?
Low.
Low, okay. Do we think higher or lower than 2%? Lower or higher?
Probably a weird answer, so probably lower.
Probably lower. Okay, should we see? So it's quite low. Not that many people go on to become professors, which is quite interesting, as most people think PhD professors. Quite a small amount of people who take their PhD and then decide that that's the route they want to go down. So, although this is not the sharpest, I realise if you're at back there you're not going to see this very well, but where do PhDs then tend to go? Well, 50% of them tend to go into higher education. So about 50% will stick to working within a university or within a research environment within that. But then, a lot of other people go into different industries. And so we just had a look at our graduate outcomes at Queen Mary. I'll be with you in a sec. And we just had a look at where our PhDs go. And we got a real wide range of different job roles. So I don't know if you can see this very well, but a lot of them had taken them outside. So a lot of them taken, for example, we've got mechanical engineer, we've got medical publications, we've got so a lot of people were going to postdoc research, but also out into industry, so working at very high levels in pharmaceuticals, for example. And so it's very flexible. So at the moment you might think PhDs, universities, but it's worth having a look. And you can do this by looking at job roles. Go to senior levels in sciences, in like engineering, in drug discovery, whatever field you're interested in. And also look at organisations that do research outside of universities as well. So we might think cancer research, organisations like that. Look at the senior level roles. A lot of them will say you'll need to have a PhD to do it. They're quite broad, but it's worth thinking as well about where you might take your experience beyond higher education, because we know that half of people don't go into higher education. So, what's your question?
So, on the slide beforehand, you know how you show it with both of them, so research, career, and higher education. While being, I think my dad has a PhD, so when he did it, if you're a researcher, you still have to do some academic stuff, don't you? Like, I thought you still have to, for example, they encourage you to still lecture to people and stuff like that. Is that...
If you're at a university, then likely you'll have joint responsibilities to do that. So if you're working in a university as a researcher, the chances are that you'll also be lecturing on your subject, whatever. But a lot of people will just come out of higher education entirely and just go, right, I'm fixed wholly on research in this field. I'm in cancer research, for example, and that's where they're at. So then, you know, they're not having to do any teaching. They can. I mean, it's quite common to become a guest and go to universities and talk at different places about your learning. But generally, a lot of people, there's quite a significant amount of people as well who just go and be self-employed and do something different. So it's quite broad, but yes, the whole idea is just to make sure that that you don't just pigeonhole yourself and think, if I choose a PhD, am I stuck at university for life? Because that's not the reality. Okay.
Thank you.
Great, you're welcome. So, where do you look for opportunities that are advertised? People who are looking for people like yourself. Well, as I said, there's a great website called findaphd.com, which is international, so it's got all over the world opportunities in different countries. Of course, you can filter according to what you're looking for. But that's a good website. Now, what's good about that is you can specify whether you're looking for funded or not funded, and it will also tell you, is it funded for UK-only students, or is it funded for international students? So have a look on that and just have a broad look at just what's out there, because even if you're thinking of doing your own research project, it's very useful to see how projects are advertised, what's the language that they're using, and who are the leading people in that area. So each university will have its specialists, or organisation will have its specialists, and getting an idea of who's researching in the field you're interested in will help you in the long run. Like, have that awareness that's going to be so important. There's a couple of websites. There's also jobs.ac.uk, which is all in higher education opportunities. But you are already in a university, so if you are already in contact with people who are doing PhDs or people who are leading research that you're interested in, get to know them, network, try to build a network while you're here, because often it's word of mouth. Oh, I know somebody who's looking at that particular sort of thing. You might want to apply here, or you might want to contact the person that I know. So a lot of the time it's just your network. So beyond that, if you do see an opportunity you like the sound of, it's always worth going and looking at that supervisor's body of work, because when you're applying to them, you're going to sit down to a one-to-one interview with them. You want to know what they do, what their background is. So also, university web pages as well often have opportunities. And I've got here on one of the slides, you can also take the speculative approach, which is where you might reach out to somebody and say, I really like your research. I know you've supervised PhD projects before. Give them an idea of what you're interested in. So it's putting yourself out there. So these are just some of the approaches that you can take. Okay. In terms of funding, as I said, some are funded, not all are funded. And sometimes you'll even see a project advertised where they know exactly what they want, but it's still not funded. Or some of them will say pending funding. So just get an idea of what that funding is. And as I said, it's usually just kind of a living cost, basically. It's quite a basic cost. So it's not going to be, you're not going to be going to, Starbucks every day. No one goes to Starbucks anymore, but that's all I could think of. So again, you might have other considerations like, am I going to have a part-time job alongside this, which is really normal. I see that a lot. Some countries as well have scholarships for specific residents, you know, so it will be like if you're from this country you can apply for this scholarship. Same as in the UK, some opportunities will say UK only. There can be all sorts of terms and conditions attached. There's also things to think about, like there are bursaries. Each university has its own bursary, so would you qualify for that? So do your research as well in the scholarships and bursaries section of each university page. And then, yeah, as I said, you will have to think about whether you'll need to work alongside it, and if you're international as well, you'll also have to think about visa, what comes with that, the limitations. This is just an example of an opportunity that's currently, well, it might not be advertised anymore, but it was advertised on findaphd.com. And as I said, it does give you information on there. The thing I like about this website is it's quite straightforward as to whether it's funded or not, or whether you can apply for it. These projects usually have quite a lot of clarity. It doesn't mean you won't have to do a bit of digging around afterwards, but it just gives you a little bit of an idea. So you can see this one says it's funded but only for UK students. But it gives you the name of the supervisor, which you can then research and find out what their background is. It's actually from 2024, so this is long gone. And then I would also say if there's a deadline, it's always better to apply early if you can. So it's the same with any job. You don't want to be the last in the door. You don't want to be the last considered. So think about giving yourself enough time, but also don't leave it to the very last minute. It's quite normal as well with these sort of opportunities for them to say, get in touch if you'd like to chat about the project. So we do find that most people are very open to sit down and give you 5 minutes at least to just talk about whether it's right for you. And if that opportunity is there, I would say do take advantage of it. There are a few places you can look for funding as well. So there's a few websites on this slide. Again, I will share these slides with you so you can get them afterwards. But sometimes there's alternative charities or organisations that offer funding outside of that, but you of course will have to apply, write some sort of application and give details about your project. So worth doing some research around that. So when you're applying for a PhD, most of the time they'll ask you for a CV, and a lot of time people say, what should be on my CV? Now, this list here is just a list of all the things that could go on there, but if you don't have some of these things, don't worry about it. Generally, the CV, an academic CV can be longer than your standard CV for a graduate role. We tend to say for graduate jobs, if you're out there just applying for jobs, 1 page is great, 2 pages if you've got too much to get onto 1 page. But if you've got more details, which we often expect on an academic CV, you're going to go into a bit more detail about your projects, etc. And if you've got any publications, they're going to go on there. So they can often be a bit longer. But this is just an outline. So obviously the personal details, your educational background, your professional experience, and it's okay to have experience that's not relevant to research, right? So let's say you've been working part-time alongside your studies. There's going to be lots of transferable skills you can draw upon. So you don't need to just remove stuff that doesn't align, but talk about the skills you've got through it, because it will give the supervisor a good understanding of who you are. It gives you them an idea of your mindset, your work ethic and things like that. And you can also highlight things like conferences you've attended, or do you have any professional memberships? And of course you're going to have references on there as well, so you will be required to have academic references if you're applying for PhD opportunities. So build a good relationship with your academics while you can, because I think it's quite tricky if you don't and then you're coming back for a reference years later. So do start to build those relationships while you can. And then alongside that, there's usually a personal statement. Now, this is for advertised opportunities mainly, because if you're putting forward a proposal, then you would have a proposal of your project. But generally, you're going to read the advertisement and answer that in your personal statement. Now remember, the personal statement is always about motivation. Your CV can tell somebody what you've done, but it can't tell them why you're applying for what they're offering. So this is where you would be writing about why this project and why you are suitable for it and why you are interested in it. And showing a good understanding of who's your supervisor in this is really important as well. So a few tips on that is to just outline the skills, the knowledge, the experience that you have that applies to that. And And again, these don't only have to come through university. You can demonstrate your skills outside of that. And often, from conversations I've had with quite a few academics, they do like to see a mix of work and academics, or extracurriculars and academics. So we don't just want you to entirely talk about your degree. Who are you outside of that? What other things have you got involved in? And also show an understanding of the project that's advertised, because that's very important. Have you read it? Do you understand it? Now, you're not going to be an expert in what they're talking about because you haven't yet got involved in it, you've not done a literature review of it, but an understanding of what they're asking for and an interest at the very least. So I always say the personal statement is the why document, whereas the CV is the what or the who are you. So again, and do show some research as well, not just about the project itself, but what do you know about the environment that you'll be working into? What do you know about other things that have been delivered or other research that's come out of it? You have got a limited word count, so I understand that might not be easiest in 500 words, but these are just some ideas. Please, are you our panellists at the back? Yeah? Please do come in. There's a seat just down the front here. Hopefully there's enough seats. Yeah. What are the committee looking for when they're looking at your application as well? So this is, again, some of the things that I've already talked about, but evidence about why you're motivated to do this research. That's offered. Here you go. Get yourselves a seat just at that table. And also evidence that you've got the skills that they're looking for as well. So read the description, they're outlining what they're looking for. It's their wish list, they'll describe who they're looking for. Now, you might not tick every single box, but what can you talk about that you are confident in, or what skills do you have? Okay? And again, as I said, just understanding or evidence that you've researched it. In terms of making yourself stand out, if you're thinking about it now, get involved in things in that field. So if you are really interested in a specific field of research, how have you engaged with it? Have you attended any other lectures on it? Have you looked outside of just the university to see what's happening? Are you a member of any organisations where you get your updates? Just some level of engaging with that particular field. Again, being informed as well of what are the advancements in that field of research, where is it currently at, because that's something you'll most likely be asked about when you get to the interview. And then, as I said, the same thing, do your research and pay attention to details. Sometimes the competition is very, very high, and so a good comprehending the material well and evidencing that in your application will certainly help you to stand out. And I know that most people nowadays, and most of us, I'm included, I like a bit of ChatGPT, it helps me out a lot sometimes, but please, it's a personal statement, and when it sounds like a robot, which I'm seeing a lot, it just feels like you haven't put the effort in. Even if you've given it your statement and asked it to refine it, it can give it you back sounding so robotic that the assumption will be that you've just not looked into this. So please make it sound like you. So in summary, just a few things to remember. Okay, use language that's active when you're writing an application and your CV. So active, I mean things like I investigated, I delivered, I developed, these sort of words that are stronger than just saying things like, sometimes I see applications where when somebody's describing what they do, it sounds more like a job list, like a job description, than it sounds like you telling me what you achieved. So it'll be like working, let's say for example, working in a shop to deliver good customer service. To me that reads like I'm reading the job description, they're telling me what they need me to do. But if you instead say, I developed good communication skills through customer service by doing X, Y and Z, it suddenly sounds more active and impressive. So just think about language. Use evidence, so numbers, results, etc. if you can. Just make sure in general it's appropriate to the area that you're going into, right? So just use the language that meets and aligns with the area that you're going into. So yeah, these are, I'm not going to read through every single one of the things on this list, as I'll share the slides with you as I said, but just look and show a good understanding. Okay? And if you've it's actually quite nice as well if you've talked to somebody in that field, or you've had contact with that person before, or somebody working in that university, you can talk about that as well. So you're just showing that you're engaged with that level. Yeah?
How much, so in the personal statement, how much of the emphasis should be on your own experience? Because for some of the PhD applications that I've seen, they sort of ask what you hope to gain from this PhD. So I was just wondering, like, do you mainly talk about your own experience, or do you sort of try and link that as much as you can to what you hope to gain as well?
Yeah, it is personal, isn't it? If someone's saying, what do you hope to gain from this project? It is personal. Now, of course, the thing that you're going to have to gain is the result of what they need you to do the research on, right? But how are you going to develop? Or where do you see yourself going beyond that? Because a lot of the time, people are looking for ambition. When any employer, any project that's put out there, it's about you and how is this going to develop you going forward. So just think about what are the opportunities that you're going to get out of it. Who are you going to engage and learn from? How is this going to help you in terms of your longer term goals? Let's say you're saying, I want to go into research in this particular area. How is it going to develop you in that direction? Okay, great. Just a few other considerations just to go through here. Well, we were talking at the moment about applying for PhDs, but as you are doing a PhD or as you're, working on your research project, and we're going to talk to some of our panellists who already are in that process, you are working independently. So some of the things to think about is how are you going to keep engaged in university life? How are you going to be included in other things going on? Because when you're on your own and you're doing a research project, you're very independent, but there can be some alienation with that as well. So think about how you're going to stay engaged and also make sure that you have those contact points, which is so important for your mental health as well. And build a network around it, because it might be only you on your project, or you might be doing something so niche that no one else is kind of working on that, but then you'll be probably able to meet with other PhDs or a research community of some kind that you can engage with. So just understand that there's other things that come with it. It's not the same as being in a class where you're all moving through the same modules together. So it's a support network. Just a lot of these things are kind of slides that repeat a little bit, so sorry if I keep going over it, but again, it's things like working alongside it, right? So how are you going to look after your mental well-being? And then also choosing the right supervisor as well. So it's okay just applying for an opportunity, but you're working very much one-to-one with your supervisor, so you've got to have a good relationship with them as well, and agreeing on what that relationship is going to look like and how much support you need. It's important that you make sure that's agreed beforehand, and that's part of what the interview's about as well. It's kind of finding that match to see if you're the right person for it. So unlike a job where it's just like answering all these skills we need, it's a lot more of a personal relationship. So there's a few things to consider about whether it's right for you. The project might sound amazing, but if the supervisor's approach isn't what you're looking for, it's not going to work for you, then that might be a thing to think about. So more considerations I've got on here. Let's have a look. Yeah, so again, and you'll see as well, because we've got some panellists here who are getting involved in this session, and there's, a lot of the time, although you might be working independently, there may be conferences that you can attend, there may be ways of engaging with the university, and with sessions like this where you can get involved with other things rather than just strictly just doing your research. So hopefully we'll hear a little bit more about that in our questions. I'm not going to go through these anymore, I'll share them afterwards. Now, I've got some resources as well to share with you. There's loads of support, and as a career service as well, once you finish your studies, we support students or graduates or 3 years after they finish at Queen Mary. So we will sit down and look at your applications with you, or we will do a practice interview with you if you're anxious about it. And we also have lots of resources online as well. So do engage with the career service if you need support, or you have any questions, or you feel that there's somebody who can support you at whatever point you're at. And even when you are doing a PhD, if you're at Queen Mary, you could still use the career service, because a lot of people are doing a PhD and still going, I actually want to go and work in industry now, so now I want to make that transition. So there's support there for that as well. Again, just want to share as well, careers appointments. Hands up if you've ever had a careers appointment with us. Good, a few people, great. So alongside the resources as well, there's sometimes it might be after this session, you've got some insights, but you still need that one-to-one time to sit down and talk with us. Please do come and just reach out and sit down and chat. And it's also if you're still not sure if it's right for you and you want to talk about that, then please do. But the career service, the reason we have careers consultants is so that we can offer you one-to-one support. And one-to-one support is very important, as we've already mentioned, especially if you're going into something where you work entirely independently as well. So if we're a touch point where you can come back to, or wherever you end up, if it's a different university, there's a career service there. And they are there to support PhDs as well as undergraduate and master's students. Okay? Now, I have got a questions thing here. So does anyone have any questions on what I've delivered so far? No problem if you've got more questions for me, because we do have a Q&A after our panel. So what I'm going to do is now introduce, so have we got all 4 of our panellists? We've got 3 here. Oh, 4, brilliant, fantastic. Now, because I've not met our panellists before, so forgive me. So, next one is, sorry. Claudia, you're next, yeah. So, if you give me one moment, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go straight over to Claudia's, oh, so you've got a question, sorry.
Yeah, it's just about the slides. Could you go back to the QR code so I can scan it, please?
Oh, you mean the attendance one?
Yes, yes.
No problem, I will put that one up on the board. After Claudia's spoken, I've got it at the end, so I'll share it, okay?
I've got a lead.
Oh, you've got to leave, okay, quick.
Thank you so much.
There you go. Yeah, you also got here. Nice to meet you. If you go back to the... You got it?
Yeah, you want it?
That's there, you go.
Okay.
Did you get the QR code, yeah?
You got it? Or you want? Fine?
Okay.
Okay, I will be quick.
Don't rush. We've got 5 minutes. 5 minutes? Yeah. And then we'll do our
Fantastic.
panel.
Hello everyone, and sorry I was late, but I was in another meeting. So my name is Claudia D'Aresto. I'm a professor of mathematics at Queen Mary, and I'm also the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Lead for the Faculty of Science and Engineering. And I will be in the panel afterwards, but I wanted to talk to you a little bit about EDI, Equality, Diversity and Inclusion, but also about the environment. So when I entered the room, you were talking about applying for a PhD, choosing the right project, choosing the right supervisor, which is clearly extremely important. But it's also important to choose the right institution. So it's really important the environment where you will do your PhD, because it's not just a project that you will do on your own. It's important the sense of community, it's important the people that you will have around. And for instance, you want to make sure that you will be in a university where everyone is welcome, independently of gender, sexual orientation, ethnicity, and so on. And at Queen Mary, we are very proud of having a very inclusive community. And I wanted to give you some examples of the activities that we are running here that might be of interest. All right, so first of all, okay, let's go. Okay, in the Faculty of Science and Engineering, we have 5 schools. So we have the School of Mathematical Sciences, where I am. We have the schools of Physical and Chemical Sciences. We have the schools of Electronical Engineering, Computer Science. We have the schools of Engineering and Material Science. And then the last one, which is the School of Biological and Behavioral Sciences. And each one of these schools, they have an EDI committee, and on the EDI committee there is a representative of the PhD students. So the PhD students are very important in our community, and we want to hear their voice. And often these PhD students, they come up with very interesting ideas about how to improve our environment. In mathematics, for instance, I've run several projects with our PhD students, and I will tell you about them in a little bit. So the 5 schools are together in the faculty, so we also have an EDI committee at the level of the faculty, and we have representatives of the PhD students coming to those meetings as well. For instance, we have a big community here at Queen Mary of PhD students from Mexico. They are supported by a certain scholarship, which is actually funded by the Mexican government. So they are very active, and they often come to the EDI committee because we wanted to address some specific issues that they had because they were like moving from Mexico to the UK. So what are the activities that we have run in the past? So the university has an awareness and inclusion calendar. So every month there are like some days where we want to celebrate some groups of our community. For instance, October is Black History Month. Then we have July, which is Pride Month, and I believe February is Pride History Month. Okay. So we have, for instance, organized events to give visibility to scientists and engineers from the queer community, for instance. We had events around October to give visibility to mathematicians from Black heritage and so on. But more in general, we really wanted to understand, are we really inclusive? So do we give the right messages? Like when I teach mathematics to my students, right? And if I talk about calculus, for instance, right? They would probably think about the so-called fathers of calculus, and they are Isaac Newton and Leibniz, and they are both white male Europeans. So we wanted to ask ourselves, but there are also mathematicians that are not white men European. There is mathematics everywhere, right? And you could do the same kind of argument for biology, chemistry, and so on. So we have run a project called Diversifying the Maths Curriculum. So it started in mathematics, but then it moved to biology, and then it moved to different disciplines in the faculty. And all of these resources have actually been developed together with a group of our PhD students. So let's see if I manage to open this. Do I manage?
It should be clickable.
Maybe.
Can you see the mouse?
Yes, I'm doing it, but it's on the laptop and not on the screen.
Oh, okay, let's
For
just...
some reason.
We duplicate this display. Yeah, we'll do it now. Okay. Just do it open here.
Yes, very good. Okay, so fantastic. So this is the web page of the faculty, where there is a section called Culture. And in this section, there are a lot of EDI resources. So, for instance, there is this booklet that we initiated a few years ago. And these are short biographies of mathematicians from a diverse background. So, for instance, we have mathematicians from Africa, from Asia, China, and then we have linked these biographies to the modules that we teach. I will share, I could send you the link afterwards, but this has actually been a very interesting project together with our PhD students. Then we have run recently a project on history of mathematics. Then there was a similar project, Making Diversity Count in STEM, so this work was more like engineering focused. And we had also some similar project on biomedical sciences and biology. So this, to give you an idea that when you do a PhD, of course, the research component is extremely important, right, because you're working on a project. But there is much more. There is also the environment where you are, and if you are willing, you can also get involved in activities of this type. And when now our PhD students, they apply for a postdoctoral position, or they apply for a different job, and they ask for a reference letter, I'm always very happy to write in that reference letter that they have been taking part in this sort of activities, because it shows independence, it shows also the desire to improve the world around you. So my advice is always like to make sure that the PhD is a sort of empowering experience under many points of view. And I believe I'm done with my time, and then I will be in the.
That's really interesting. Thank you for sharing.
No problem.
Yeah, a good point that there's more to it than
Yes,
just doing.
exactly. And to be honest, the majority of these ideas, they came from the PhD students, not from me. We have also run like videos, interviews to mathematicians from a diverse background. They were posting on social media, so they've been amazing.
Great, thank you so much for that. So yeah, so our panelists are here. I'd love to have. How would you like to approach? Do you want to come up one by one, or would you rather sit down and talk? How would you be most comfortable? You can tell this is completely informal.
Ooh.
Yeah, do you want to all sit down? Yeah. So I do have a microphone that you can pass along. So we have now 3 current PhDs who are going to tell us a little bit about their experience. I'll say to start, if you just introduce yourself, just talk a little bit about your background and what your, what you've done, and then we'll open up to the room for some questions, and we'll be able to find out a little bit more about your different approach, because I think you're all in quite different fields. So take it away.
So I'm Tere. I did my undergrad in biomedical science, and then I did my master's at Queen Mary. I did a conversion course, and then through that I had the same supervisor for my master's course as my PhD course, and I was able to continue on with the project that I did then. So I'm in the School of Engineering and Material Science, and I currently work with biomaterials for tissue engineering.
Hi, I'm Alex. I did my undergraduate in pharmacology at Cardiff University, and then after that, to be honest, I wasn't always sure that I wanted to be like in a lab necessarily. I did a placement year outside of the lab, working in clinical trials. Then, finished my degree, didn't know what I wanted to do basically, so then ended up doing a rotational graduate scheme where I could do rotations inside and outside of the lab, and that was at AstraZeneca. And that was very cell biology based. And then after that I kind of was at a bit of a crossroads again of not knowing whether to just stay in industry, because I was very fortunate that the graduate scheme I was on had a permanent placement after, so you did 3 rotations in different departments, and then you got to pick which one basically you wanted to stay in. But then I made the choice to kind of leave that, and then obviously started my PhD here, but because I really enjoyed the kind of work in industry, I didn't massively want to leave, so I found a PhD with an industrial sponsor, so it's still sponsored by AstraZeneca. And basically what that means is that I spend part of my time here at Queen Mary's, and I'm also in engineering and material sciences, also over at the Blizzard Institute in Whitechapel, and also some time in Cambridge at the AstraZeneca campus.
Hello, I'm Charlotte. I did my undergrad in biological sciences at UWE in Bristol. I then worked for about 2 years during COVID developing antimicrobial small molecules and bacteriophages for alternative therapeutics. And then I sort of realised that in science often you need a PhD because there is almost a glass ceiling, and I didn't feel like I had sort of the fundamental knowledge to do a PhD, so I went and did a master's in microbiology at London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, really focused on molecular biology because I knew I wanted to go down more of a synthetic biology route. Did another year working at Oxford in a couple of different labs, and then finally ended up doing a PhD here at Queen Mary, and now shared between Queen Mary and Imperial in synthetic biology, developing antimicrobial proteins and bacteriophage. So again, I love phage apparently.
Great. Hopefully the room can hear me. So I think we're going to open up a discussion, a general Q&A, if anyone has any questions. And I'll kick it off. What's fascinating to me, just hearing the 3 of you, is you've got quite different journeys into doing a PhD. For example, either working beforehand in industry and coming back, or perhaps always knowing you wanted to do research. I wonder if I could just ask, what motivated you to think that PhD was the route to go forward? Like, what was the main reason that you chose to pursue a PhD?
Do you want me to pass down? When I was working those 2 years during COVID at UKHSA, I kind of saw that a lot of the more higher up positions, and sort of when looking at other jobs and career paths, a lot of them sort of look for people with PhDs. And speaking to a lot of people around the institution, the opinion was kind of a consensus of if you want to go far in science, you need to have a PhD. And I really love research, I really love being in the lab, so it sort of made sense to follow that path and have a project that is my own, which is really cool. PhD really gives you the chance of like pure ownership over a project.
To be honest, my experience was very similar. Having been in a work environment, everybody around me basically had a PhD. The departments that I was working in, I was obviously on like a graduate training program, but every single person in that department, or those specific departments I was in, had PhDs. So it clearly seemed a bit of an industry standard. I think the problem as well of being like the market is now definitely oversaturated with people. So people even with PhDs are going for positions which are lower than really what they should be going for. So then what I saw from that is that if then I don't even have the PhD, then it maybe would be an issue, okay, not in the next 5 years, but in the next 10 years, as you're saying, if you want to progress in science, then it probably is the right thing to do. And also, speaking to people and like now doing a PhD, I think you get to become an independent researcher and an independent thinker in a way that you don't necessarily, if you just start like a graduate entry-level job at a company, the kind of like critical thinking skills that maybe you wouldn't have to do if you're kind of just relying heavily on others around you, whereas when you have a PhD, you're so independent, you have to overcome all of the problems by yourself. So it's definitely like a helpful thing and helps you become a better scientist as well, which was something important.
Kind of similar to them. So after I finished with my master's and I spent about 8 months looking for a job, which was unsuccessful. So majority of the roles you were looking for required a PhD, and what Alex said before, a lot of the like master's positions that you would normally get before, you had PhD students that were applying for them. So kind of was a no-win situation, and then I got an offer to do a PhD, and I was really interested in like the work I had done previously. So I was quite grateful to just continue on with that and develop my skills further. So in the end, it does make sense.
Okay, so I was a PhD student 25 years ago, right? So,
You couldn't tell.
there is a certain age gap here. Okay, and I was in Italy, because I'm Italian, studying mathematics, because my dream job was to become a maths teacher. Then, when I was at university, I realized that actually I wanted to create new mathematics. So for me, somehow, in the very last year of my studies, there was this thing of like, I want to prove new theorems. Mathematics has always been very creative for me. But I had no idea of what a PhD was, because I'm really first generation scholar, so my parents were not at the university, okay? So I had no idea, zero. And I was very lucky because there was a professor who told me, you're good, you should apply for a PhD. And the Italian system is very different from the British one. Basically, to get a PhD scholarship, you have to pass an exam. So I remember I graduated very quickly because I had to get ready for this exam, which was a written and a oral exam. Then I got my PhD scholarship. And I went abroad almost immediately. So I wanted to continue basically what I did in my master thesis because I really liked it. And then the same professor told me, there is this colleague in Austria, he's very good. You should write an email to him, ask if he can supervise you. And he said yes, and this was like European community, so I could basically use my PhD scholarship to go abroad. And then I ended up never go back to Italy again. So then I was in Austria for 8 years, and then from 2010 in this country. So I believe, in my case, there was always this somehow passion for research and for really doing something new. And now I feel extremely lucky because I basically managed to get the kind of job that I really wanted. But I acknowledge that 25 years make a difference. So I do believe that probably now the job market is very, very competitive. So also to get a job which is not in academia, having a PhD is actually a very, very good choice. So well done to the three of you.
Great, that was really insightful. If anyone has any questions, do put your hands up. I have a question. So I believe each of you then did a master's before doing your PhD? Yeah?
I didn't.
Oh, you didn't?
Yeah.
That's interesting. So we see a lot of opportunities that are advertised that don't necessarily specify a master's. So for those of you who did do a master's, I'd be interested to know how you feel your master's helped you, whether it gave you the propulsion you needed to get straight into the PhD. And for yourself, Alex, I would say, how did you take the leap from undergraduate to PhD?
So for mine, I essentially, like I said before, I continued my master's project with the same master's supervisor. So I was offered a PhD through that, which made the process a bit more easier, I guess. And then it was beneficial in a way because I knew the supervisor I was working with, I've worked with them before. I also knew the group that I was working with, and I was familiar with the lab, so it made like easing into the process just easier, essentially, compared to like the work that my friends have had to put in, and it's just a much more difficult process for them to go through right now.
As I said, I did a master's to sort of round out my fundamental understanding of molecular biology. So I found it really useful when I went into my PhD because I had relatively recently, refreshed the concepts from, even though I learned a little bit in my undergrad, it was a lot closer to when I started my PhD, when I was using these concepts in the lab and actually having to consider the impact that they would have on the experiments I was doing. And I did my master's was very heavily lab-based. It was a taught master's, but we were in the lab every single day. We had lectures in the morning and then lab in the afternoon, so it was very heavily lab-based, and a lot of the skills that I learned there I now use every day at my PhD. So I would definitely recommend, if you are looking for a master's, to then do a PhD, looking for a master's that is heavily in the lab, especially if you want to do a lab-based PhD. If you don't want to do a lab-based PhD, then maybe it's not the right master's for you. So yeah, looking for like an MRes or something where you're getting used to, using a pipette and doing like the silly little calculations and things like that.
For me, so I think I would have found it incredibly difficult to go straight from an undergraduate into a PhD. To be honest, people do it. It's possible. It's possible, especially if you kind of know already what you want to do. And I guess the main reason that people don't do that is because undergraduates generally are relatively general, and then PhDs are super specialised. And so it's hard to know at that point what you want to do. So for me, as I say, I didn't know at that point that I wanted to do a PhD, to be honest. But then having gone and done a rotational scheme, so I did 3 different rotations in 3 different departments, 2 of them were lab-based. I was able to get some really good experience, to be honest, probably just as good, like if not probably for me, maybe better than if you're doing like a master's. Like I spent 2.5 years in a lab, so that was really good experience then, which then allowed me to then kind of know exactly, okay, these are the bits I like a bit more, these are the bits I don't want to do, which then helped me pick a PhD. So I'd say probably that you don't, like I found, like I don't think it hindered me not having a master's, to be honest. It's not like it was the most important qualification. Obviously, I'm here without one, but at least for me, having that experience, knowing that that's the bit that I'm interested in, was the most important thing in helping me get a PhD, I think.
I mean, the only thing that I can add is that if you have a certain level of continuity, right, from your master to a PhD, maybe it is slightly easier because you already have a sort of a strong background, right? If you don't have a master, or maybe if you change topic, you can succeed anyways, but you probably need to put a lot of effort because you probably need to learn a few things on your own to become maybe more independent, like sort of immediately. It is extremely useful, in my opinion, to find a good mentor who could be like your supervisor, for instance, or a more senior colleague, because it is really useful to listen to the experience of other people and to take on board some advices. So some of the professors that I met when I was at the beginning of my PhD have been extremely influential for the whole of my career because they really gave me like very good advices.
Great. Does anyone else in the room have any questions they thought about?
I think again I'm interested in the funding systems of self-funding. So I just want to know, like, for example, especially you work with Pfizer, so did you after had to apply for the funding that, or they just actually, because you're already working somehow there, you already got like, you didn't have to apply for it? I know, for example, if you are a lecturer here, you have some funding, you apply for the funding, so it kind of leave you less teaching and more doing the research because you have that funding for the university. But I'm unsure, for example, if I want to make an application for an organization or a charity, how that works in terms of if that money would help the university to have me, or that would go, how it works, because it needs to pay the university, yeah?
Well, it depends on the funding body, right? So, for instance, the Leverhulme Trust is a charity, okay? As an academic, I can apply for a research grant, and I can ask on that grant to have a PhD scholarship associated with that grant, which means that I will have basically one position for a PhD student, and then that is advertised, right? And then applicants, we will have applicants, and then there will be interviews and so on. But it is usually the academic who is the supervisor of the project to apply for that for those funds. Okay. Then every university gets a certain number of PhD studentship per year. Okay, we have a certain allocation. And then there will be projects appearing on our webpage, and you can apply for those. And then there will be some selection process. Okay. And yeah, usually we have a lot of applications. Unfortunately, we don't have as many scholarship as we would like to have, but you go through basically a selection process and an interview and so on. You can also decide, for example, if you don't get a PhD scholarship, you could decide to do the PhD anyways, self-funded, which basically means that you will not get a stipend, right? I have a student that I'm supervising that, for instance, is self-funded. And so he had like some money on the side for this, but he's also like doing some teaching, so some like tutorials. He gets like some teaching assistant position, okay? And of course, he makes sure that that teaching is not too much, so that he has time for his research as well. So this is also a possibility. Yes.
In that case, if I start a non-funded PhD, what
Yes.
is the prospect of getting funding or a scholarship later on?
It depends on the field. I believe it's very difficult to answer this question because, for instance, if you do a research which could be funded by an industrial partner, then maybe there is a possibility, okay? But in my field, for instance, mathematics, it's basically impossible. It really depends on the field and depends on the project.
While we're on that point, does anybody else want to talk about how their PhD was funded, or if it was funded by the organisation or was different? Yeah.
So mine is funded by Queen Mary, so I ended up getting a BAME scholarship, which is for ethnic minorities. So in my department specifically for the School of Engineering and Material Science, they were offering this for the year that I was applying, and I think they offer 5 a year. I'm not sure if it's still the same.
Yes. Yeah, I believe we had when did you start? Last year?
Yeah.
Yeah. So last year we had 5 BAME studentships, so there was basically one for each school of the faculty. But it really depends on the year, right? So, yeah.
So yeah, I get funded from that, and then that goes towards some of my lab costs, and then also a stipend that I get monthly.
For me, so I didn't have any money to pay for it myself, so I needed a self-fund, like a funded one. And basically on, I don't know if you've spoken about like the website like findmeaphd.com. I assume if most of you are looking, that's why you'll be looking. Obviously you can filter there for funded only. And so my PhD is built around lots of government kind of initiatives fund PhD programs. So mine is something called like the MRC, so the Medical Research Council, and then it's called like ITTP, which is kind of like a toxicology training program. So they fund the majority of it. And then I also have AstraZeneca as my industrial sponsors, and they kind of top up my stipend and top up my consumable fund, which if you have an industry sponsor is quite common. So that's a kind of nice way of doing it, because you get like it's not loads of money, but it's like 2 or 3 grand extra on top of your like stipend that you'd get from like the MRC basically. Yeah.
I'm also Queen Mary funded, but just bog standard Queen Mary funded. So yeah, they keep it in line with UKRI stipend amounts, which is quite nice. So even there's no money business. But what I will say is, if you are not sure, if you know you want to do a PhD, if you're not sure what you want to do, look into doctoral training programs like Lido in London. Oxford has one. It used to be called Interdisciplinary Biosciences, but they changed the name of it to something else. There's lots of them around, and you do typically some learning modules in the first couple of months, and then you get a chance to try 2 or 3 different labs, and then you often choose one of those for the rest of your 3 years. So those are quite good. I really like recommending them to my master's students. You know, they really enjoy being in the lab, but aren't really sure what they want to do. And then also different funding councils pay different amounts of stipend, so that's something to consider as well. So Cancer Research UK and the Wellcome Trust pay a lot more than UKRI. So PhD, if you're in London, PhDs at the Crick, or there's a CRUK joint one between quite a lot of universities, including Barts, which is part of Queen Mary, that pay decently. And I know as well, when you're doing a PhD in London, one of the big hitters is not only rank, but also TFL, and the Crick will pay for your travel card as well for the year, which is quite nice.
Very good.
I just thought nice little tips to know that I've learned from talking to a lot of people that I wish I knew earlier.
Great. Yeah. Should we take a question from the front here?
I had a question for the panelists who did the conversion course. What was the conversion course that you did? What was it terribly different from what you did in undergraduate, and specifically also about your final project? Is it something that maybe you left a little bit open-ended on purpose to then explore later on for your PhD, or was it something that sort of you realized there was a lot more to it as you went on and decided to go further in that?
So I did my conversion course in biomedical engineering, and then my background previously was biomedical science. So a lot of the math techniques, physical aspects, I just was not familiar with. but I do think the course, so you're able to choose the modules that you want to do for some of it, and the modules that I chose were able to kind of help and situate me better for the final project that I was doing. So the reason why I ended up continuing was because as I went further with my project, I realized that there was a lot of areas that were just unexplored. So my supervisor and I at the time, towards like the final end of my master's project, we kind of came up with different possibilities, just different rationales that we can do, and then we progressed that to a PhD stage so that we can do that for a research proposal.
Hey, thanks. Was there another question? Yeah.
So something which hasn't been mentioned yet is recommendation letters from my academic professors or supervisors. So for one of the applications that I'm going for, they say you need around 2 to 5 recommendation letters, and some of the professors that I've spoken to, they've requested a draft for one. So I was wondering if you have any tips or like recommendations for templates to use.
Okay. So, I mean, personally, for instance, I never request a student to write a draft. I draft a reference letter. But in case you're asked to provide a draft, then I would say keep it simple, right? So, what do we want to see when we read a reference letter? So we want to see that the student is well prepared, right? So, for instance, you could mention your marks, for instance. So you need to make the positive things really stand out. Okay. Then we want to see the passion for the project, right? And there you can talk about your motivation. You need like to sound that you're really inspiring, and that this is what you were mentioning before. You don't want a reference letter written by ChatGPT so that we all know that it has been written by a robot, okay? So you don't want that. You want to make it very personal. And then I would say talk about those extra skills. So it could be maybe during your studies, I don't know, you have been involved into some activities at the level of the schools, maybe some like citizenship, maybe you have done some project on the side, okay? So this shows, in my opinion, your work ethic, the fact that you are independent, that you are reliable, and so on. Yeah? So I hope it helps.
That does help. Thank you.
A question that I thought was also good to just put to the panel is, what do you think would make a good application for a PhD?
There is a question.
Sorry.
You want to ask a question?
Oh.
You do that first.
Yeah?
Okay.
Okay, just quickly, if you think back to when you were writing your applications, or if you're looking at applications, what do you think is the top tip that you would say to think about when you're writing an application?
Yeah, so for instance, when I look at an application, right, and it is, maybe I have like a project advertised, right, and then I look at this application and I see a student that has already done a piece of work related to my project, maybe in the master thesis, right? That for me is a very strong point, because I see this sort of continuity, and I also can see that maybe the student has already some skills related to the research work, okay? So in particular, if you've done a very good final year project, talk about it, and don't be modest, because it's really not the moment to be modest. Be authentic, because I believe authenticity is at the end of the day the most important thing, but don't make your imposter syndrome take advantage of you, and then don't sound too modest, okay?
I feel like even the skills that you have, like no matter what, try to match them back to what's being advertised in the PhD post. Like even if they're not quite similar, try to draw back to bring them some comparison to them, so you can at least show like how you would work towards this and whatnot. And then, as cliche as it sounds, to kind of be passionate about the work, not just because you want it to get a job later on, but actually show that you're interested in this because you will be doing it for about 4 years or so. So just be a bit passionate about it.
And even some ways of, just to continue for that, of like reading what the lab that you're applying for is publishing, what are they working on at the moment, not even just in the, because it will give you a general idea of some of the techniques in like the project proposal, but it won't be super detailed. Whereas if you can look at the supervisors, look to see what they're publishing, if they're publishing similar work, what techniques are they using there. Maybe, okay, it's not something that you've done, but it's something that you've learned about in a lecture that you're really interested about and you've seen it, and that's specifically why you've picked like this project, is being able to show, okay, you generally want to do a PhD, fine, but why specifically this PhD? Like, what is it that stood out to you here that's made you obviously apply for it?
Yeah, 100% agree with all of those things. And I used to, when I was writing my personal statements, split them into thirds. So I used to do a third. The first third was, this is a long time ago, but the first third was why I want to do that PhD and why that area interests me. And then the second third was what skills I have that are relevant to the PhD and how I can apply what I've learned through my work experience and through my master's and undergrad to the techniques that are used in that lab and for those experiments. And then the final third was what I hope to get out of it, what skills I hope to gain, and where I hope to go after. And then I always used to sprinkle a little bit about why that specific institute is the best place to do it. So like if they have specific facilities that they really like, or they really advertise and they're really proud of, and things like that.
Great, already good. Did you want to ask your question?
It's kind of similar to that, but I was just going to say, some of you guys did PhDs and masters and bachelors at like different places from where you did them initially. So how did you like make the necessary connections to now do it in QMUO, I guess?
Did you hear?
Yeah. I'm a really big proponent of doing your degrees and everything at lots of different places. I think even though if you do it in the same place, it's quite easy. You already have a network, which especially in a PhD is really important because it is very challenging and very hard. But I've been in a lot of different labs at this stage. I think I've been in about 7 different labs, and everybody does everything differently. There's like barely any consistency across them. So you really get a lot of wide-ranging experiences and different ways of operating in different institutions. And it means now when I go into a new lab, I can pick things up very quickly. But I was quite lucky with my PhD now. My co-supervisor is my supervisor when I was working at UKHSA. So I sort of emailed them and was like, hey, I see you've advertised this PhD, I'd love to chat to you about it. And then they connected me with my primary supervisor, and then we had a chat. That's also something I would recommend doing, actually, is emailing the supervisor and seeing if you can have a chat with them. Supervisors are very busy people, so they might say no, they might say they don't have much time, and they might not get back to you, but showing that you're keen is sort of, another point in your favour.
For me, obviously it's very helpful to know like the industry that you're going into, but obviously you don't have to know absolutely everything about it before you go, you can apply more, like findmeaphd.com, obviously you can apply for different universities, but definitely to that point, like it's helpful to speak to the supervisor before to get an idea. And also what you can do is ask to speak to people in the lab that you want to join, because, and sometimes like away from the supervisor, like you can find that you can just have like maybe like a quick 15-minute Zoom call with them or something. Is really helpful because they will give you an actual insight into what it's like in the lab, because obviously everybody is nice to you the first time you meet, like everybody is going to be nice to you in an interview and they want you to join the lab, but it's helpful to actually speak to people in the lab at that time to know what it's like and if it's a work environment that you like working in. And that's like, for me, like that was helpful coming into an institute that I didn't know and didn't necessarily know kind of what the like culture was like here, what the environment was like, and that kind of gives you like an initial insight into it if you are going somewhere different.
So for me, where 2 of my degrees were at the same university, the one thing I'd say you really don't think about is like the documentation side of things. So like if you're working in the lab, like risk assessments, little things like this where it's just different depending on which labs you go into, which schools, institutions. But I think as long as like you're part of a group, you just confer with your supervisors and whatnot, it should be easy essentially to like figure out what needs to be done. So you're never truly alone. There is always someone that can help situate you and whatnot.
Yeah, so I would also say try to connect with the existing PhD students. That could be actually a very useful thing to do. Like in the School of Mathematical Sciences, the PhD student, they organized a seminar for the undergraduate students, and I believe maybe I see someone who is always attending our seminar, and I believe this is a way for the undergraduate students to understand what is research in mathematics, so that you can talk with the current PhD student, you can understand a lot about the school. And I know, for instance, that Imperial has a similar seminar, so if you check the web pages, you will always find seminars organized by the PhD students. They're called sometimes junior seminar. And it's a nice way to get in contact with the PhD students there and to get an understanding of the kind of environment that they have. And in this way you can understand if you would like to be a PhD student there or not. And in addition, I believe, make use of the London network. Like, for instance, in mathematics, there are many seminars that are run in collaboration between Queen Mary, UCL, King's, and Imperial. And I'm sure that probably there are similar seminars also in other disciplines. So it's good to be in London because you can really get in contact with many universities.
Great. So we have just 4 minutes left. So I think maybe we can do one more question at the back. Yeah.
I'm an international student, so did you guys notice anything that the international students have a different experience applying for a PhD? Yeah.
Was that something about what other considerations are there for internationals when applying for a PhD?
Yeah, did you notice any differences between international and like domestic students while applying for PhD? Because I'm a master's student.
Yeah.
And I just like found out that I'm interested in a PhD.
Yes.
In my second one. And I'm just exploring how I'll be applying to a PhD.
So there are different schemes, right? Because depending on your country of origin, you might be eligible for some specific schemes. For instance, we have the so-called CSC studentships that are the one funded by the Chinese Council of Science or something, right? So clearly only Chinese students will be eligible. We have the so-called Latin partnership, which is this agreement between Queen Mary and Mexico. So you might maybe want to look into possibility in your country of origin, right? To basically be funded by your government to do a PhD here. So this is one possibility. And then every year we have a limited number of PhD studentships for overseas students. But unfortunately the number is very small and we have many applicants. So if you could maybe find some other ways, that would give like more chances to you. Yeah.
Before we're running out of time, I'm afraid, but there's time afterwards if you'd like to. It's just that this is being recorded. So just before we finish, your top tip, just very quickly, what do you think should be the top consideration for our applicants going forward? Or just any tips?
Be yourself. Be your true self, right? So be authentic, and if you're passionate about something, make it very clear, because this is a very important skill, and it will make your PhD a joy and not like a torture.
So, be more specific and like actually choose a project that you will be interested in doing for the next 4 years, because there are just like 9-hour days where you're doing the same things repetitively. So just make sure you actually enjoy what you're doing.
Exactly.
I guess kind of similar to that, but just make sure like you're doing a PhD because you really want to do a PhD. Don't do one just because you think you're not going to find a job afterwards. Like, it is still possible to find a job without one, but there is like, you definitely need like a lot of resilience in the face of like experimental difficulty, things going wrong consistently, and you have to make sure that like you know that going into it, that there might be loads of issues and things might not go right, and you might have to kind of change a bit the direction, and the thing that kind of pushes you through like is the passion for the subject and wanting to do it, you know, because if you kind of go into it half-heartedly like, oh, I'm just doing it because I don't know what else to do, then it's not going to probably end that well.